She thought she was having a secret romantic dinner with her lover. She didn't know I was at the next table with his wife, holding the receipts for the entire secret life she tried to hide from me. My world has always been one of order, of structure. As an architectural historian, I find comfort in the logic of foundations, the elegance of load-bearing walls, and the stories told by the graceful curve of an arch. My office at home is a testament to this passion. Books on Gothic cathedrals and brutalist monuments are stacked in meticulous towers on my floor. Blueprints of forgotten buildings lie unfurled on my desk like ancient maps. My life, much like the subjects I study, was built to last, or so I believed. For 15 years, my marriage to Eleanor was the central pillar of that life. I viewed it as my magnum opus, a structure of profound integrity. She was the vibrant, intricate stained glass to my solid, dependable stone. At 43, she still possessed a restless energy that I, at 45, found both captivating and, if I'm being honest, occasionally baffling. Our home, a restored mid-century modern weed purchased a decade ago, was our shared sanctuary, a physical manifestation of our partnership. But structures, even the most magnificent ones, can decay from the inside out. The signs are often subtle at first. A fine crack in the plaster, a faint scent of damp in a disused room. You ignore them at your peril. I remember the evening it all began to unravel with a clarity that still chills me. It was a Tuesday. I was in my office, lost in a particularly dense passage about the structural innovations of the flying buttress, when Ellie came in. She leaned against the doorframe, a glass of wine in her hand. "Don't you ever feel like we're living in a museum, Al?" she asked, her voice tinged with a familiar melancholy I had long ago learned to categorize as simple fatigue. Beautiful, perfect, but no one actually lives here? I looked up from my book, marking my page. That's a strange thing to say, El. We have a beautiful life, a comfortable one. I offered a logical, reassuring explanation about financial stability and the merits of a quiet, intellectual existence. It was the kind of answer I had given her many times before. She just sighed a wisp of sound and drifted back out into the living room. I returned to my book, the brief interruption forgotten, the crack in the plaster neatly plastered over my mind. Later that night, the quiet of our home was absolute. Ellie had gone to take a shower, a long one, as was her habit. I was reading in the living room when a small, insistent light pulsed from the coffee table. It was her work phone, a sleek, impersonal device her company had given her, one she guarded with a casual but non-negotiable privacy. It lit up again, and this time I saw the preview on the lock screen. A message from a contact named Simply J. The Sovereign confirmed for 8 p.m. Our private booth. Can't wait to have you all to myself. The words didn't compute at first. They were an alien language, a foreign element introduced into the carefully curated ecosystem of my life. The Sovereign, one of the most expensive, romantic restaurants in the city. A private booth. The possessive, intimate finality of that last sentence. It hung in the silent air of my living room, a wrecking ball poised to strike. A cold dread, heavy and suffocating, settled in my chest. For a full minute, I simply stared at the dark screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. To pick it up would be a violation, a trespass against the 15 years of trust that formed the very bedrock of our marriage. Not to pick it up felt like an act of willful blindness, like a man refusing to investigate the tremor shaking his own house. My hand moved, seemingly of its own accord. My fingers felt thick and clumsy as I typed in the passcode. With a sickening, tragic irony, it was our anniversary. 1-0-2-4, October 24th. The screen unlocked, and the world I knew ceased to exist. It wasn't just one message. It was a library of betrayal, an entire alternate reality meticulously documented in texts and photos. My wife, my Ellie, was living a life I had no part in. The messages from Julian, were a torrent of shared jokes, clandestine plans, and passionate declarations. They had pet names. He was her lion. She was his Ellie cat. I felt a wave of nausea. Worse than the passion was the mockery. I scrolled up, my thumb moving with a morbid curiosity. I found myself mentioned. They call me the professor. Sometimes the monument. Is the monument sleeping yet? One of Julian's texts read. Ellie's reply. He's entombed in his office with his dusty books. The coast is clear. Each word was a chisel, chipping away at my dignity. The shame was a physical thing, a hot flush that spread from my neck to my face. This wasn't a spontaneous mistake. This was a sustained, calculated campaign of deceit, and I was its subject of ridicule. Driven by a desperate, cold fury, I moved from the phone to her laptop. Her email password was the same. A new kind of excavation began. I unearthed a secret credit card statement, a Visa Black Card I never knew she had. It was a ledger of their affair. Weekend trips to wine country, boutique hotels, jewelry from stores I could never afford. And then I found it. An email chain with a real estate developer. The name on the emails was Julian Vance. The name snagged in my memory, a faint but distinctly negative echo. Vance? Why do I know that name? I thought, a fog of confusion momentarily piercing my pain. A conference paper I critiqued, maybe? An article? The specific memory wouldn't surface, lost in the overwhelming deluge of betrayal. It didn't matter. What mattered was the subject line of the most recent email, viewing for the waterfront penthouse. They weren't just having an affair. They were building a future. On the ruins of mine. I closed the laptop, the soft click echoing the sound of a door slamming shut forever inside my own heart. The structure of my life hadn't just been damaged. Its foundations had been dynamited. I didn't sleep. When Ellie came to bed, smelling of lavender and lies, I feigned sleep, my body rigid, my breathing a perfect, measured imitation of slumber. The next day, I called in sick to the university, a thing I hadn't done in years. I couldn't face my students. I couldn't lecture on the integrity of historical structures when the architecture of my own life was collapsing around me. I drove to my office on the deserted campus. It was my sanctuary, a place of logic and quiet contemplation. But today, the quiet felt suffocating. The initial shock had receded, leaving behind a white-hot, silent fury. It was a dangerous, unfamiliar energy humming just beneath my skin. I felt a primal urge to destroy something, to make the external world reflect the internal chaos. My eyes landed on a scale model of the Chartres Cathedral I had spent the better part of 3 months constructing. It sat on a pedestal in the corner, a marvel of intricate detail, tiny, perfect flying buttresses, minuscule gargoyles, a rose window made from a sliver of painted acetate. It represented order, beauty, and enduring faith. My hands trembled as I walked towards it. I clenched them into fists, my knuckles white. I wanted to bring my fist down and smash it into 1,000 pieces of balsa wood and glue. To obliterate it. To feel the satisfaction of destruction. The urge was so strong it made me dizzy. But as my arm tensed, another part of me, the historian, the analyst, the man who had dedicated his life to preservation, took over. I saw the model not as an object of my rage, but as a metaphor. You don't demolish a cathedral with a sledgehammer. That's vandalism. If it must come down, it requires a plan. A controlled demolition. Precision. I unclenched my fists. With a hand that was now perfectly steady, I reached out and carefully adjusted a single, tiny gargoyle that was slightly askew. In that moment, the rage did not vanish. It crystallized. It transformed from a wild fire into a cold, focused laser. My path was clear. I picked up my phone and dialed my older brother, David. He's a divorce attorney, a man whose worldview is as pragmatic and unsentimental as a prenuptial agreement. Al, you sound terrible. What's wrong? I told him everything, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion churning inside me. David's reaction was immediate and predictable. The cheating bitch, he spat. Okay, here's what you do. Get a PI, document everything. Wait, you already did that. Good. I'll file the papers on Monday. Change the locks. Throw her stuff on the lawn. Sue the bastard for alienation of affection if you can. It was the brute force approach. The sledgehammer. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. No, David. This isn't about just ending it. This is about truth. A building doesn't just collapse. It fails. It fails because of hidden flaws, shoddy materials, a rotten foundation. I'm not going to just walk away. I want them. I want everyone who matters to see the faulty foundation she built this on. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Jesus, Sal, David said, a note of grudging respect in his voice. What are you planning? A deconstruction, I replied. A very, very controlled deconstruction. The plan took shape with the cool precision of drafting a blueprint. My first step was to learn everything I could about Julian Vance. A quick search confirmed he was a high-flying property developer known for luxury condos and a flashy, aggressive style. And, as my research confirmed, he was married. His wife was Dr. Lena Petrova. The discovery was a surprise. She wasn't a socialite or a former model. She was a respected immunologist at the city's top research hospital, with a string of publications to her name. An intellectual, a serious person, a woman, I suspected, who, like me, valued integrity. She was the unwitting and essential component of my design. My next step required a delicate touch. I couldn't just call her and announce that our spouses were having an affair. It would be messy, emotional. She might not believe me. She might even warn him. No, I had to approach her on my own terms in a controlled environment. I spent an hour crafting the perfect email. I wrote to her from my university address, introducing myself as Professor Alastair Finch. I explained that I was consulting on the architectural planning for a new university bioresearch facility and had been deeply impressed by her published work on sterile lab environments. I proposed that her insights into the functional needs of a cutting-edge immunology lab would be invaluable. I asked if she might be willing to meet for dinner to discuss the project. It was professional, plausible, and appealed to her intellect, not her emotions. Then, I made the second crucial call. I dialed the sovereign, the stage for my little drama. Reservations, how may I help you? A smooth, professional voice answered. Good afternoon, I said, adopting my most authoritative, professorial tone. I'd like to book a table for two for Friday evening at 8. Certainly, sir. And the name? Dr. Petrova. That's Petrova. I paused. I believe a colleague of ours, Mr. Julian Vance, has a private booth reserved for the same time. We may be joining his party later for a potential business collaboration. Could you possibly seat us at a discreet table adjacent to his booth? A quiet corner with a good vantage point would be ideal. There was a brief silence, the sound of polite typing. The request was unusual, but my tone implied it was the kind of thing powerful people did all the time. The maitre d', I gambled, was a man accustomed to accommodating the whims of the wealthy. Of course, sir, he replied without missing a beat. Table 27 would be perfect. It offers an excellent view of the Chevalier booth. We'll look forward to welcoming you and Dr. Petrova. The trap was set. The final piece clicked into place less than 3 hours later when an email landed in my inbox. Dear Professor Finch, it read. Thank you for your intriguing proposal. I will be delighted to meet for dinner on Friday. Your timing is perfect. Sincerely, Dr. Lena Petrova. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silent office. The pieces were all in place. The actors were all heading toward the stage. All I had to do now was survive the next 3 days. The 72 hours leading up to Friday were the most surreal of my life. I moved through my own home like a ghost, an observer in a life that was no longer mine. I was living in a condemned building, acutely aware of the creaking floors, the groaning support beams, the imminent collapse that only I could see. I watched Ellie with a new, horrifyingly clear vision. Every action, every word, was filtered through the lens of her betrayal. The way she angled her phone away from me, the late nights at the office that were now obvious lies, the new, expensive perfume she wore. It was all a performance, and I was the unwitting audience. Now, I was the director. On Thursday morning, as we sat in the kitchen we had once designed together, a space of clean lines and warm wood that now felt like a sterile museum exhibit, she delivered her lines with practiced ease. Ugh, I have a huge client dinner tomorrow night. Remember? She said, stirring sugar into her coffee. The big merger deal. It's going to be an absolute marathon of boring shop talk. Don't wait up. I looked at her over the rim of my mug, my expression a carefully constructed mask of mild spousal sympathy. Right? The big one. Well, good luck with it. Thanks, honey. She smiled, a bright, false thing, and a wave of relief washed over her face at my easy acceptance. She thought she was so clever. I felt a sudden, sharp memory surface. It was our 10th anniversary. I had been so proud to give her my gift, a rare signed first edition of Le Corbusier's Towards a New Architecture. I was giving her a piece of my soul, a key to my world. I remembered her smile, polite, appreciative, but with a faint disappointment in her eyes that I had refused to see at the time. She didn't want a key to my world. She wanted a world of her own. And I now realized, with a pang of guilt that was sharp and unwelcome, that I had never really asked what that world looked like. I had been the curator of our marriage, not her partner. I preserved it, I cataloged it, but I had forgotten to truly live in it with her. The thought didn't excuse her betrayal, but it added a layer of tragic complexity. It was a failing of the structure itself, a flaw in the original design I was responsible for. That evening, I kissed her goodbye as she left for a pre-dinner strategy meeting. A lie so blatant it was almost insulting. After she was gone, I began my own preparations. I packed a small overnight bag, clean shirt, toothbrush, a change of clothes, and placed it in the trunk of my car. Whatever happened tonight, I would not be sleeping under this roof. I would not be an actor in this farce for one more night. I was raising the building. The Sovereign was exactly as I'd imagined. A symphony of hushed tones, clinking crystal, and the low hum of moneyed conversation. It was designed to impress, a stage for the city's elite. I arrived 20 minutes early and took a seat at the polished mahogany bar. I ordered a martini, the cold, sharp bite of the gin a welcome anchor in the swirling sea of my nerves. I was nursing my drink when I saw her. Dr. Lena Petrova. She was striking, with dark hair pulled back in an elegant chignon and intelligent eyes that seemed to be taking in everything at once. She carried herself with an air of quiet confidence. She was not a woman to be trifled with. "Professor Finch?" she asked, extending a hand. Her handshake was firm. "Lena Petrova. A pleasure to meet you in person. Alistair, please." "The pleasure is all mine, Doctor." We were led to table 27. It was perfect, a secluded two-top, nestled in an alcove, with a clear, unobstructed sight line to the Chevalier booth, a lavish, U-shaped banquette shrouded in velvet curtains for privacy. The stage was set. Our conversation began, as planned, with professional pleasantries. She spoke passionately about her research, and I found myself genuinely intrigued, a small part of my academic brain clicking back into gear. But my attention was divided. My eyes kept straying to the entrance. Julian Vance arrived first. He was exactly the type I'd pictured, tall, handsome in a slick, overconfident way, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. He was shown to the booth. 10 minutes later, Ellie arrived. She swept into the restaurant, wearing a stunning black dress I'd never seen before. She looked vibrant, alive. She spotted Julian, and a smile of pure, unadulterated joy lit up her face. It was a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. It was a gut punch. I watched as Julian stood to greet her. He took her in his arms and gave her a long, lingering kiss, right there in the middle of the restaurant. It wasn't a furtive peck. It was a kiss of ownership. Something inside me, some last vestige of hope I hadn't even known was there, shattered. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was his happiness. It was her happiness. The structural integrity of things, I heard myself say, realizing I had been rambling in response to a question from Lena. She was looking at me with a concerned, analytical expression. Her eyes, the eyes of a trained diagnostician, flickered from my face to the Chevalier booth and back again. "Professor," she said, her voice now low and cautious. "You seem unwell. Is everything all right?" I met her gaze. The time for pretense was over. "No, doctor," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm afraid nothing is all right at all. You see that woman in the black dress? The one kissing that man?" Lena's eyes followed my gaze. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. "That woman," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth, is my wife. Lena's reaction was not what I expected. There was no gasp, no immediate flurry of questions. Instead, her sharp, intelligent eyes narrowed slightly. The clinical observer took over. She stared at the couple in the booth for a long, silent moment. I could almost see the gears turning in her mind as she processed the data, formulating a diagnosis. She turned her gaze back to me. "And the man he is with," she stated, her voice devoid of inflection, "is my husband." It wasn't a question. It was a conclusion. I simply nodded. A silent, grim understanding passed between us across the white tablecloth. We were two strangers, two academics, united by an obscene and unwanted variable in the equation of our lives. The charade of our business dinner evaporated. The air between us was now thick with the shared, unspoken reality. We sat in silence for a moment, two statues at a feast, watching our spouses laugh and touch hands across their table, utterly oblivious. They were in their own world, a bubble of secrets and stolen moments, and we were about to burst it. "How long have you known?" Lena asked, her voice a low murmur. 76 hours. I replied, the number precise on my tongue. "And you?" A bitter, humorless smile touched her lips. "About 30 seconds. Though, in retrospect, the symptoms have been there for months. The unexplained expenses, the business trips. I simply diagnosed them incorrectly. The moment I had been planning for, the one I had rehearsed in my mind 100 times, arrived unexpectedly." Ellie excused herself from their booth, presumably heading for the ladies' room. This was it, the moment of intersection. "Excuse me," I said to Lena, my voice steady. I rose from my chair, my legs feeling strangely disconnected from my body, and positioned myself directly in the path of my returning wife. She saw me when she was 10 feet away. The confident, happy stride faltered. Recognition dawned, followed by a wave of pure, unadulterated panic. Her face, which had been glowing with joy moments before, turned ashen. "Alistair," she breathed, her voice a ghost of a sound. What are you doing here?" "I'm having dinner, Eleanor," I said, my voice quiet, almost conversational. It was a tone that seemed to frighten her more than shouting would have. I gestured with my head back toward my table. "I'm here on business. With Dr. Petrova." I let the name hang in the air between us. I watched her process it, saw the frantic calculation in her eyes as she tried to understand the impossible coincidence. Her gaze darted past me to my table, where Lena was now watching us, her expression a mask of cold composure. Ellie's eyes widened in dawning horror as she recognized the woman from photos she must have seen. I don't understand," she stammered. "Don't you?" I asked softly. "I think you do." At that moment, the other two actors arrived on the scene. Julian, noticing Ellie's prolonged absence, had come looking for her, and Lena, a portrait of dignity, had risen from her chair and was walking toward us. The four of us stood there, a frozen tableau in the bustling restaurant. Julian's slick smile faltered as he took in the scene. Me, his lover's husband, standing with his own wife. The comprehension on his face was slower, but it arrived with the force of a physical blow. The keystone of their secret world had been removed, and the entire arch was about to come crashing down. The maitre d', a man whose entire career was built on sensing and diffusing social friction, materialized at my elbow as if summoned by the sheer density of the tension. "Is everything to your satisfaction this evening?" he asked, his eyes flicking between the four of us. "Everything is illuminating," I said calmly. "But I believe this conversation requires a more private setting. Do you have a small room we could use?" He didn't miss a beat. "Of course, sir. The Camellia Room is available. Right this way." He led us down a short, carpeted hallway to a small, elegantly appointed private dining room. The silence as we walked was deafening. Once inside, we took our seats, the division stark and symbolic. Ellie and Julian on one side of the polished table, Lena and I on the other. The door clicked shut, sealing us in. It was Julian who spoke first, his voice a low growl. "What is this? Some kind of sick joke?" "The only joke," I replied, my eyes fixed on him, "is that you thought you could get away with it." Ellie finally found her voice, turning to me, her eyes pleading. Alistair, please. We could talk about this. Just you and me. That time has passed, Eleanor, I said. We are well beyond that point. Lena, who had been silent until now, spoke with the precision of a surgeon. I have only one question, she said, her gaze locked on her husband. Why? Julian laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Why? Look around, Lena. Life with you is a goddamn medical journal. It's sterile. It's boring. I wanted some life. So you chose my wife? I interjected. Your wife is a lot of fun, Professor, he said with a contemptuous smirk. She knows how to live. Then, the final piece of the puzzle, the faint, negative memory I'd had of his name, clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The fog in my mind cleared. The Vance Development Group. The op-ed. This wasn't just about fun, was it, Vance? I said, leaning forward. My voice was low, but it cut through the room. I finally placed you. 3 years ago. The public hearing on the historical waterfront district rezoning. I wrote an academic op-ed against it. I testified before the city council about the architectural significance of the old warehouses. The council voted against the rezoning. It cost your company the bid. It cost you millions in city subsidies. Julian's smirk vanished. He stared at me, his expression hardening. I pressed on, the words coming fast and cold. This wasn't a random affair. You saw my wife at a fundraiser, didn't you? You knew who she was. This was a hostile takeover. It was revenge. The color drained from Ellie's face. She turned to Julian, her expression one of dawning horror. Julian? Is that true? He looked from my face to hers, the cornered arrogance returning. He shrugged, a gesture of casual cruelty. The professor has a brain after all, he said, not to me, but to Ellie. He took something from me, so I took something from him. Seemed like fair architecture to me. In that moment, Ellie finally saw him for what he was. And she finally saw herself, not as a beloved mistress, not as a woman on the verge of an exciting new life, but as a tool, a decorative, disposable pawn in a rich man's petty game of vengeance. The sound she made was a small, strangled sob of utter devastation. The foundation of her fantasy had just been revealed as rotten to the core. The sight of Ellie's crumpled face, the sound of her broken sob, should have brought me a sense of satisfaction. Vengeance, after all, was the point of this elaborate stage play. But instead, I felt a profound and weary emptiness. This wasn't a victory. It was just a detailed and accurate assessment of the damage. I stood up, the legs of my chair making a soft scraping sound on the rug. The movement drew all their eyes. I felt a strange and total calm settle over me. I held all the power in the room, and its weight was surprisingly light. I looked at my wife. Her tears had carved black tracks of mascara down her cheeks. She looked small and broken. Eleanor, I said, and my voice was not cruel, merely factual. You have until Sunday evening to remove your personal effect from the house. Take what you need for the immediate future. Her head snapped up. Alistair, no. You can't. You can't just throw me out. I'm not throwing you out. I corrected her gently. You were never thrown out. You left, piece by piece, over the last year. You left every time you lied to me. You left every time you met with him. You threw yourself out the moment our vows became an inconvenience. I turned my attention to Julian. She's all yours now, Vance. No more sneaking around, no more secrets. You can have the reality. You can deal with the fallout, the divorce lawyers, the explanations. I hope you find it as thrilling as the fantasy. He just glared at me, his jaw tight with fury. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my wallet. I took out $300 bills and placed them neatly on the table. This should cover my meal and Dr. Petrova's, I said. I looked at Julian. The rest is on you. After all, I added a final, sharp twist to the knife. You seem to enjoy paying for things that are heavily mortgaged. I gave a slight nod to Lena, a silent acknowledgement of our strange and terrible alliance. Then, without another word, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving the three of them sitting in the ruins of the world they had created. I didn't look back. I didn't go to the hotel where I had packed a bag. The idea of an anonymous, sterile room felt wrong. I drove on autopilot through the glittering, indifferent city streets until I found myself in the deserted parking lot of the university. I let myself into my office. Here, surrounded by the silent, steadfast companionship of my books and my work, I could finally breathe. The adrenaline of the confrontation drained away, leaving a hollow, aching void. I walked over to the scale model of the Chartres Cathedral, the one I had almost destroyed in my rage. I looked at its impossible, delicate beauty, a structure designed to make one look upward, to contemplate eternity. My own grand design, my marriage, now lay in rubble. I reached out a trembling hand and gently traced the line of stone spire. I had a sudden, overwhelming vision of it all turning to dust under my fingers. The phone buzzed in my pocket, a harsh, intrusive sound. I almost ignored it, but I saw Lena's name on the screen. I answered. "Are you all right, Alistair?" Her voice was steady, a lifeline in the darkness. "I'm in my office," I said, my own voice sounding rough and distant. "And you?" "I'm in a taxi." I couldn't stay there. There was a pause. He tried to follow me, to explain. "There's nothing to explain," I said. "No," she agreed. "There isn't. Thank you, Alistair, for the truth, as brutal as it was." "We deserve the truth, Lena," I replied. We sat in silence for a moment, connected by miles of wire and a shared, intimate trauma. We were two survivors, huddled in our separate shelters, listening to the storm rage outside. I looked again at the cathedral on its pedestal. I hadn't smashed it. I had chosen precision over destruction. I had chosen to be the architect, even of my own life's ruin. And in that small, quiet choice, I felt the first, faint blueprint of a new foundation begin to form. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal paperwork and painful logistics. It was the messy, unglamorous work of demolition. Dividing assets, closing joint accounts, untangling a 15-year life. Ellie, through her lawyer, alternated between desperate pleas for reconciliation and bitter accusations that I was being vindictive. I ignored them both, communicating only through David. David was my rock. One evening, as we sat in his office, surrounded by stacks of financial documents, he shook his head. "I still don't know how you held it together, Al." Seeing him like that, I would have lost my mind. I leaned back, the leather of the client chair sighing. "I've been thinking about that," I admitted, the words coming slowly. "It wasn't just her, David. I see that now." He looked at me, confused. "What are you talking about?" "She's the one who cheated." "She is. And that's unforgivable," I said. "But a structure like that, a 15-year marriage, it doesn't just fail because of one storm. They were cracked for years. The warning signs were there, like stress fractures in concrete. I chose to plaster over them. I told myself they were cosmetic. It was easier than admitting the foundation itself was flawed. I finally looked at him. I am as guilty of neglect as she is of betrayal." Saying it out loud didn't absolve her, but it did something more important. It gave me back a sense of agency. I wasn't just a passive victim of her choices. I was an active, if unwitting, participant in the long, slow decay of our marriage. The realization was painful, but it was also liberating. It meant I had the power to build differently next time. A year can feel like a lifetime. 1 year after that night at the Sovereign, the dust had settled. The divorce was final. Ellie, I'd heard, had moved to the West Coast after her relationship with Julian imploded under the weight of reality. The demolition was complete. Now, it was time for reconstruction. Lena and I had kept in touch. Our shared trauma had forged an unlikely, but powerful, bond of friendship. We met for coffee, visited museums, talked about our work. There was an easy comfort between us, a shared language of loss and recovery. One crisp autumn afternoon, I met her at the dedication of the newly restored Argent Tower, an Art Deco masterpiece downtown that had been saved from the wrecking ball. We stood across the street, watching the evening light glint off its magnificent, gleaming facade. "It's beautiful," Lena said softly. They didn't try to hide the repairs. You can see the lines where it was broken, where they reinforced the steel. I nodded, understanding her meaning completely. "That's how you know it's strong," I replied. "Its history is part of its beauty now." Authenticity isn't about being perfect and pristine. It's about surviving the breaks and having the integrity not to hide the scars. It's about building something true, even on a flawed site. She turned to look at me, a small, genuine smile on her face. You're a good man, Alistair Finch. I'm a man who is learning to read his own blueprints, I said. We stood there for a while longer, two people watching a beautiful old building stand tall against the darkening sky. My old life was gone, a ruin I would always carry a piece of. But for the first time in a very long time, as I looked toward the future, the space before me didn't feel like an empty void. It felt like an open site, cleared and ready. It felt like a new foundation waiting to be poured.